This morning, we've been joined by Freetown's City Mayor, Her Worship, Yvonne Aki-Sawyerr. The Mayor is here to talk about Council's revenue collection, water, and update on her meeting on sanitation, among other things this morning. Good morning, Madam Mayor. It's a pleasure having you.
Good morning.
Morning, Marina. Good morning, Victor. Good morning, viewers. It's great to be here.
Indeed. Water and sanitation. Why water and sanitation?
Well, I think these are two of the things that matter most to Freetonians. When we did a community engagement in May last year, as part of our preparation of the development plan, we asked residents across Freetown what their major priorities were. We gave them nine different areas of focus, sectors, and asked them to rank. And the number one issue was access to water. Okay. So of course it's something that we've really prioritized. Sanitation was also an issue within the context of, not separately, but within the context of informal settlement upgrades. But I'll talk about water and then I'll come on to sanitation. So knowing that this is an issue, knowing that access concerns everybody, affects everyone's lives. So clearly, if you, in many households, if you don't have pipe-borne water, it is the girls and the women who go out to get water. We see it every day. We see girls with jerry cans. And we know that in some communities, that water collection happens very late at night, very early in the morning, which puts many girls at risk. And you've heard many, many times the expression "wata for wata," which is really, really deeply disturbing, because although people joke about it, it actually speaks to a very, very deep societal problem, which is affecting the potential of many, many of our girls, and also creating the wrong sort of dynamic and attitude relationship between, girls and men, and a relationship of power, in which something that is a necessity is being traded for, a girl's, effectively her body. So one of the things that we've done, and I must also add, before I explain what we're doing, I must also add what I think most people know is that our water provision in Freetown is primarily the responsibility of Guma Valley Water Company. So Guma's, they're responsible for the pipes, for ensuring that water gets to our homes, but we also know that one of the issues that I talk about endlessly is the growth of our settlements without planning. So whether you're talking about an informal settlement or you're talking about formal neighborhoods with concrete housing, what we don't see happening is planning. In other countries, before land is allocated to residents, there is first a plan. There are subdivisions, roads are brought in, pipe-borne water is brought in, electricity is brought in, and then the homes are connected. But we do it backwards here. We don't plan. We allow people to build what they want, where they want, because planning is not a function of the council. Planning is a function that is centralized at the Ministry of Lands. And we don't, as you all know, there is no master plan for the city that says you can't build here because we're going to build a road. You can't build here because we're going to have pipes. So literally everybody does what they want. And the consequence is then that providing services afterwards becomes very challenging. So our interventions need to be seen within that context. And in that context, what we've just done is continue with a rollout of 65 water points. And if you go around the city, yesterday some of my team members were in Mainkine, Calabar Town, where we've got 5 of those. And I mentioned the girls because these are women-led, but they're not stopping there. I was at one in Smart Farm yesterday afternoon, where the challenge that we saw, the water kiosk is built, the water filtration is there, the women have been trained, but guess what? Even though the borehole was dug deep and there's a pump there, they're having challenges with the water availability. And I looked around and I said to them, there isn't a single tree. all the trees have been cut down. And this actually is affecting our water access. But the good news is, irrespective of these challenges, 60 additional boreholes into the city, available to local communities, is a major intervention that is really, really transformative for many of our residents.
Madam Mayor, permit me to come in. I mean, you're here today to speak on a lot of things,
okay.
And specifically something I would love to ask you about. But let's come to one of the key things you're here to talk on, which has to do with the revenue collection. Now, since you took office in 2018, this is one thing that you've been emphasizing on, the increase in Freetown Cities Council revenue in order to improve service delivery. Now, however, there have been reports of resistance from the central government regarding FCC's financial autonomy. Can you help provide a concrete figure on revenue collection trends, maybe since 2018 to due date? I mean, if you don't have that, maybe you can speak to some of the challenges that have hindered the council's ability to generate and retain funds.
I would have that, but I don't have it off the top of my head. So maybe as the conversation goes on, I can go into my phone and try and dig that up. But I can tell you that our revenue has grown, which was our target with bringing in the digital system. When I came in as mayor in 2018, we only had 37,000 properties on the books of council. And those books were books. They weren't an electronic system. And you know that with data, you can't really manage data. You can't do analysis. You can't really interrogate your information if it's on paper. So we brought in a digital system, and that enabled us to expand. So today we have over 130,000 properties, because as many of you would know now, anybody who lives in a house in this city knows that their house will be served a demand notice, and there'll be a photo
Has
of
that
the
been
house.
fully implemented? This property?
Yes. So it's fully implemented, and of course, receiving a demand notice is one thing, paying is the other. So the first bit is ensuring that everybody gets charged, and maybe there'll be a small percentage who fall through the cracks, because every so often someone comes to us and says, we haven't got a demand note, you haven't captured us. But the system uses a satellite image of the city, and we're just uploading. The first one was uploaded in 2019. We're uploading a new one within the next few weeks. It was supposed to have happened about 2 months ago. There were some delays, but it's being uploaded now. So with that satellite image, we are able to see every property. And then we take a photograph, and then we upload various data from your property, and that's what is used to calculate your demand note. So the good thing is that our system covers everything. The challenge, coming back to your point, Marina, is the challenge is compliance. And as you know, back in 2020, that's what you were referring to. When we first started, there was this position of the central government that we should stop the system. And of course, when people are told, as the saying goes, board one fly, you shake it. As for many people paying taxes, the last thing they want to do, it's a human sort of response. So if you're told by the government, don't, it's taken quite a while. A lot of people took time to hide behind that excuse. But I believe that is now resolved. In fact, the system that we introduced is now being rolled out by the government to other councils, including Kenema, I think to McCaney as well. They are using the mob tax system that we introduced back in 2020.
Quickly before Jones coming to ask this question, like I said, you're here to speak on a lot of issues, and I'd love to ask. Now, there has been, speculation about your interest in running for the APC Flagbearer position in the next election. Can you maybe clarify whether this is something you're actively considering, or what conversation have you had within the party regarding this ambition?
As a matter of fact, there are flyers.
There are flyers also, yeah.
Well, I thought we were going to be talking about revenue, sanitation,
no, we're going to be
water.
talking about everything.
We can't, in no particular order.
That part.
You didn't mention that as you were going through the agenda.
I mean, you're here this morning to speak about revenue collection, water and sanitation, and amongst many other things. And that delves into the many other things, because like I said, we've been seeing flyers. There has been a lot of speculations about the mayor is actually vying for the flag bearer for the APC come 2028. So maybe you'd love to clarify that, to
to
the
viewers,
Freetonians.
to Freetonians.
Yes, exactly.
Well, I mean, I think as we all know, I believe just before I came on, you had PPRC here with a member of the Sierra Leone People's Party. And as we all know, that political parties go through cycles in which the leadership is selected. And that leadership selection happens within the context of lower level elections. It happens within the context of a national convention. And ultimately, the constitutions of the two main political parties in this country are such that that leader of the party is also the person who leads the party into elections. I'm a member of the APC party, and I'm a member of the APC party who, by God's grace and through the support of the party, has been able, and of course I must mention specifically through the support of former President Ernest Bai Koroma, His Excellency former President Ernest Bai Koroma. Through that support, I've had the opportunity to serve this country. In 3 different capacities at a national level, or a national and subnational level. I mean, the work that I've done in the charity space with SLBT, the work that I've done in the business space, that's all outside the political framework. But it was when Ernest Koroma, former president, was head of state that Ebola struck. And when I came here to volunteer for 3 months, initially was my idea to help fight that response. It was because of his leadership that somebody who was living abroad and hadn't been part of this, of the system, as it were, would be given the space to not only come and volunteer, but I was actually then, because of the work that I did and the way it was positively received, there were no barriers. You know, what was of importance was the quality of the delivery and the commitment to the cause. And so coming on the 13th of November, as I did in 2014, at the height of the outbreak, when the plane was empty, because most people who could fly were flying out, I found myself in a position where I was very quickly not only absorbed because I came in as a member of the UK government team, but I was not only just given the space to work, I was then asked to become the director of planning for the response. And so I served. I had the opportunity to serve. And I did so until the outbreak was declared over. And then I was given another opportunity to serve in the capacity of the delivery team lead for the President's recovery priorities, you know, for the President's delivery team. So that gave me an opportunity to work in governance, to see governance, and to be responsible for driving through alongside others, reporting directly to the Chief of Staff then, Saidu Konton CC, and then into His Excellency the President. That gave me that platform to really work through with ministries, departments, and agencies, drive through an agenda for 18 months, which was really, which contributed significantly to the turnaround from our Ebola plunge, because obviously during Ebola the economy collapsed, and got us back on our feet. So I'm setting the stage. I'm setting the stage because that was done within the State House under the leadership of the President, who of course was the leader of the All People's Congress Party. And with his blessing, I entered the political arena as mayor of Freetown in 2018. So in terms of the journey and the contribution, 7 years, we've just talked about water, we've just talked about revenue, 7 years of leading the most challenging city in the country, the capital city that accounts for roughly 25% of the country's population. It's certainly been quite a task, particularly when I came into this task without the benefit of being alongside the party that I serve in national government, them being in national government. So I've been, as they call me, the opposition mayor. But I'm not opposing anybody. I'm here to serve all Freetonians. But of course, from a political perspective, my party is in opposition, and yet I'm the leader of the City Council, which is the largest council in Freetown. So
Yeah, because I want us to come to a standstill. Are you actually clarifying?
So
I'm clarifying context,
okay,
and I'm clarifying how the process works. So because sometimes people, maybe the layperson doesn't understand, how is it that these things come about. So there's a constitutional context within the party, there's a historic context within my involvement, and it's that involvement, this is where I wanted to come, Marina. It is that involvement, it's that exposure, it's the work that I've done previously, it's the work that I've done at the national level in governance, it's the work I've done in a crisis, it's the work I did during the war, and it's the work that I've done at this subnational level, which has really led, and you saw, we were talking earlier on about the National Geographic award that happened yesterday. It's the exposure that I've been able to get at the international level, which has been really beneficial for Freetown. So much of our funding, this water that I just talked about, is coming from the Swiss Development Corporation. They've never before invested in Sierra Leone. They've never before done any projects in Sierra Leone, financed anything. But because of the leadership that I've displayed, thankfully, this is something which has led to them being convinced to make this investment. The same is true of the Central Business District. We have 2.5 million Swiss francs being granted to us by the mayor of Zurich. She had to go and do a referendum to her citizens because they don't give their city money to another city, but it was done. And it was done because of the confidence that has come from the work that I do and the projection. And it's against this backdrop. It is against this backdrop, Marina, that yes, the answer to your question is yes, I am vying for the leadership of the political party that I'm humbled to serve and to be a part of, proud to be a part of. And I believe that by God's grace, because as we all know, power comes from God, that by God's grace, if it is His will, and with the support of the party that I love and the people that vote for that party, because this is an internal election, then I believe that this is something that I will achieve. Right. So yes is the answer to the question that you posed. I am vying for the leadership of the APC party.
Right, thank you very much, Madam Mayor. A lot of things we have to discuss, but thank you for your honesty. So we have concluded this morning indeed that she's running for the Flagbearership position of the APC. We wish you well, in your journey.
Thank you.
Let's now discuss more thorny issues in Freetown. We'll try to be a bit frugal with time because we don't have much time. You touched on something very sensitive earlier while you were submitting about unplanned, city, and all of that. So recently, Bala almost closed Takugama, because of what I'll describe as audacious encroachments, around the periphery there. There is this thing, improper regulations, particularly so with the issuance of building permits in Freetown. Before now, I think it was last year or so, you were on the same set, and we discussed this, and it appears as though, you've not been seeing eye to eye with the Ministry of, Lands on this, because elsewhere, as I read, even in Nairobi, it is the city that gives, permits, and even in other bigger cities like Accra, why is ours different?
It's a national government position. It's a position, as you know, I've talked about endlessly, and because I think there's a challenge when those who issue permits are not those who are accountable or responsible for delivering services. So if you don't have anybody asking you about water, about sanitation, and nobody calls you if there is a fire and the fire truck can't get in to the space, if there's a flooding, you're not the first responder. Because of that disconnect, so I just talked about the water situation. I just explained to you the difference between a planned and an unplanned environment. So when that disconnect happens, so those who are responsible to provide the permits are not the ones who are accountable when things go wrong, then you will have a challenge. You've just described what happened with Bala. I can tell you that's something that I will be writing to the ministry about. And it's this, let's not take this personally, okay? I think it's important to understand this. This is not about a personal decision. This is about an institutional practice, which I strongly feel needs to change as soon as possible, because you can get to what is known as a tipping point, where beyond that point, you can't actually reverse the damage that's being done. And I really feel that as a city, we're getting to that point. I was driving along the old road a couple of, well, I've seen it now 2 or 3 times, but last weekend I saw it again, and I decided that I must write, because this particular one is, I think you used the word audacious when you talked about the encroachment around Takugama. Well, I think the word audacious applies here as well. Just before the turning to low cost, where the area is known as Barracks on the old road in Kissi, you will see that in the waterway, under the water comes there, of course you have a bridge, and then you would expect the water to continue. Where the water should continue, there is now a 4-story structure. And I'm told that when the rains happened last year, the school in the neighborhood flooded, or everyone's homes flooded. So you're literally building in disasters, because individuals are being allowed to put their own desires, their own wants, their own priorities above that of the wider society. And they're being allowed to do that within a framework where ultimately, when that road floods and you have silt and garbage on the streets, they're going to call the city council. They're going to call the mayor. And that is true of so many things. If Orugu Bridge, you're familiar with Orugu Bridge. Anybody who's passing by Orugu Bridge and looks on if you're coming from Jue, towards Freetown, look on your right. Right under the bridge, there is a massive structure going up. And this is happening throughout the city. We were at the Forest Forum yesterday, which was organized by the Minister of Environment. It was really, really well put together. His opening statement was so moving. He talked about his childhood in the village, and the trees and the water and all of the things that bring nature and human beings together and preserve our lives, because they keep our ecosystem healthy and safe, and how that's all been eroded. You don't need to go far to see that in every corner of the city. I went to extend my sympathies to Honorable Abdul Kargbo, because as you know, another challenge of our city, EDSA, and the constant fires, as you may have heard in the press, he lost his home. So they're living in Regent. And as I walked towards their house, I could hear the frogs, I could hear the birds, I could feel the cool breeze. But I said to him, this is what Hill Station was like just a few years ago, spur loop. But when you have unplanned, unregulated growth and development, if you are allowing homes to be built and you haven't done any planning in advance, you will find that every inch of land is taken. And of course, we have another problem. Lack of investment outside of the capital means that everybody from rural areas, and I mean everybody, I say that obviously figuratively, illustratively, but we've got thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands over a period of time of people coming to Freetown from the rural areas, and that puts more pressure on our natural environment, meaning that if we don't control this, we don't have a means of issuing permits in order to control what is done where. We'll see what we see now, and the consequences will impact water, which is where we started.
You spoke about a lot of things, and when you took office, there are so many things that you've brought up, that you're working towards, things like the cable car, and Sierra Leone currently we're really struggling with the issue of heat, with a lot of deforestation going on. But let's move away from that. We'll definitely come to that to discuss about it, but let's come back to your interest in all this flag bearership and the likes. Now, Your leadership has drawn both national and international. You spoke extensively about the international recognitions that you've got, and also how you've been able to, lure these people to come to Sierra Leone and invest, in specific things. Now, but within your party, some members remain skeptical, about your political influence. Do you believe the APC is ready? I'm asking this question solely because we've seen, we seem to be still struggling, with acceptance, not just within the APC and that of the SLPP, but accepting the fact that, Sierra Leone can, be able to have a female president in this country. Do you feel the APC is ready for a female flag bearer, and what makes you believe you can unite the party ahead of the 2028 election?
I do believe that the party is ready for a female, because I believe the party is ready for leadership. For new leadership, which is constitutional, so it is in our constitution that every 3 years we must go to elections and choose a leader. So there's going to be a leadership contest. There is already a leadership contest. The gender of that leader, I actually think, is not as important as some people would like to make it out. I had the privilege of seeing a survey that was done towards the last part of last year, November, December 2024, and that survey put out a number of characteristics and asked 10,000 people across Sierra Leone, and APC were the majority in the country. So if you're asking Sierra Leoneans across the country of their opinion, know that at least 45% of them, of those people, identify with the APC. The other parties can be dealing with, all the other parties altogether can be dealing with the rest. But APC, definitely 45 to 50% of Sierra Leoneans would identify. So I'm just trying to say that what was done on a national level, I would apply to the APC. And you'd be interested to find out that that survey showed that out of 10 characteristics, gender came number 7. So people are interested in a leader that can deliver. Okay. They're interested in a leader that can touch lives and make an impact. And in terms of unifying, I think that's also an advantage, because when your focus is on improving the lot, not just of those around you, but of everyone, it draws people to you. And when your track record shows that you are an inclusive leader who brings everyone on board, and you don't have spats, you're not in like in a camp situation. You're somebody who works with everyone, and that's me. Someone who works with everyone, who's friends with everyone. So I do believe that from the perspective of unification, yes, the APC would be looking for a unifying leader in someone like myself. Just
to speak on the issues surrounding deforestation and that of heat and a couple of things. In December 2024, AYV's Victor Jones, my colleague seated here, spotlighted the increasing level of carbon emission in Sierra Leone's capital, Freetown. Now, slightly over a month in 2025, Namati, Sierra Leone and Invest Salona are discussing solutions. Now, this comes at a time when, according to recent reports from the Air Quality Index, Freetown's PM 2.5 concentration has risen to 3.8 times the World Health Organization's annual PM 2.5 guideline value. Now, only 5% of Sierra Leone's land area is currently covered by closed high forests, which is sparsely insufficient to absorb the high level of carbon emitted in the city. If my producer will permit me, maybe we can have that report, and we'll come back, to discuss about the issues of heat and carbon emission in the country.
Sierra Leone is witnessing what could be termed as a raging storm in the teacup. Unnoticeable and silent, but it is as deadly as a coiled viper, readying to strike. Unregulated and overlooked, Freetown is slowly becoming the capital city of smog and of the caustic and diabolic gases.
We must understand that within the context of climate change, the emission of CO2 is a big problem to the environment. And in the Sierra Leonean context, we might not be big polluters of CO2, but in our context, especially in the capital city, it's worrisome. We are seeing lots of avenues for the pollution of smoke and smudge. One, we're looking at factories, even though we don't have a lot of factories, but manufacturing in around the city, welding shops or businesses that use thermal generators are producing smoke. This might not be large, but they have their own effects to the environment. We also have cars, trucks. We see these trucks, they pass, they have lots of fumes of smoke, and this is also causing problem to the environment. And of course, we have illegal dump sites all around the city. And the general habit is setting fire to these. And because of the buildup of methane in some of these dump sites, it just catches fire and there's a lot of smoke. So this, as you've alluded, causes one, the heat stress that we are getting right now. The place is becoming hotter because there are lots of carbon dioxide.
The West African nation's greenhouse gas emissions are estimated at 5.859 million metric tons of carbon dioxide. Its NDC includes targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from 5% by 2025, 10% by 2030, and 25% by 2050.
We have the carbon monoxide as well, which fumes. It's causing health damaging effects for people who take in these kind of gases. That is leading to poor air quality, especially within the built environment. If you look in Freetown, the area where we have lots of poor air quality, well, studies may have to find out, but from the general look of things, from Congo Town to Kisi Terminal or Ferry Junction, you have lots of poor air quality because apart from these big pollution that happens around the excesses of cars, we also have households who are using fuel, charcoal and wood. All these are producing smoke, which overall contributes to the poor air quality. And if you look the context, we can see because there are, again, no more tree cover that could sequestrate this carbon into from the atmosphere, it's becoming alarming. So the place is becoming hotter, the place is becoming more, difficult for people to breathe, the air quality. That's why if you now go to hospitals, you can see that there is a rise in what we call cardiovascular diseases.
But the picture is opaque and the fight is largely anemic, slaughtered on the altars of economic gains over the health and wellness of the environment and its people. As of the 2024 census, the population of Freetown had grown to over 1,347,000. The city is now home to 12% of the country's total population.
People are having breathing problems. Sometimes they think it's normal. It's not normal. It's what is happening to the environment. So these are things, if not checked, in the long term, people will have to have, lots of problems. Asthma will be on the increase. Newborn babies will suffer from these kind of illnesses. So it's a climate concern.
The effects of greenhouse emissions do not only stop at global warming and excessive heat as seen in Freetown, but also health complications, as Dr. Halkett Baker explains them.
Carbon emissions on its own is damaging, not just to the environment, which is the most common thing that's looked at. They look at the ozone layer, look at global warming, but the effect of carbon emissions on human health is quite alarming. You see, there are a number of complications to health that can be caused by these carbon emissions, inclusive of lung diseases. It could worsen already present lung diseases. For example, asthma. They don't cause asthma, but they could worsen asthma. There have been studies that have shown that they could affect pregnancy and its outcomes. For example, low birth weight, premature delivery of children, and the likes. And also, it has an effect on cardiovascular health, that is your heart attacks, your strokes, and the rest of it.
The Global Cancer Observatory statistics of lung cancer in 2022 stood at 5.9%. 5.9% of a population of about 8.7 million is estimated at 513,300 people battling with lung cancer in the country.
The haze that clings to the skyline is not just a visual blight. It's a stark reminder of the cost of economic growth in a developing nation. From the diesel fumes of overcrowded automobile engines to the smoke from wood and charcoal fires, the air is thick with pollutants. The impact, rising health crisis, environmental degradation.
From factories and big dump sites to car and truck exhausts, the fragrance of carbon dioxide and other harmful gases is now the new oxygen. Carbon dioxide and other noxious gases have become the city's uninvited guests.
So what has been happening over time is that we have been doing both strategic coordination and operational coordination. To some extent, we can do tactical coordination, making sure that we are able to bring the stakeholders together, present the subject matter for discussion, we deliberate it, and get the way forward. Those issues that come from the coordination table at the National Disaster Management Agency every month, because we hold this meeting every last Thursday for every month, we are able to make sure that we are able to relate with the relevant institution of government and even outside government and tell them clearly the roles and responsibilities they are expected to put in place to ensure that they are able to curtail. Some of them actually require policy dimension. Some require some policy enforcement. This country will have very good policies. Sometimes we encourage our colleague institution to make sure that they stretch to the extent to ensure that those policies are enforced. So that when policies are enforced, they were able to see good results. And when the results come, you can see a society that is free of sick, free of challenge, and free of other problems.
Breathing clean air is now a privilege few can afford, as smoke has colonized the once pristine skies that Pedro da Sintra once admired. This is all happening almost at a Promax level.
Now, we the end of November, so the approach December. We don't know how January to March.
It is difficult.
All right, that was a report done by Victor Jones. Well, back with us in the studio, we still have the Mayor of Freetown, Yvonne Aki-Sawyerr.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, so a few things picked up there in December. I mean, I've observed, with keen interest that most of our areas these days are, colonized with, pockets of dump sites, and all of them are burning at the same time. Car exhaust and all of these things. It's many things, actually.
The documentary was quite extensive and comprehensive. So let me respond and tell you what we're doing in all of these areas. Bearing in mind, of course, let's not forget, let's not lose sight, because I think if I've been saying this for 7 years and I still have prominent people in civil society who reach out to me and ask questions which indicate that they haven't understood, I will not stop repeating it. The council does not issue building permits. The council does not do land use planning. The council is therefore unable to control the development of communities that have no access for sanitation vehicles to enter, and therefore by default result in illegal dumping. But there are also other challenges. Let me start with some of the things that were raised and which are really important. There are challenges, and let's tell you what we're doing in terms of solutions. So with the dump site, if you look at the Transform Freetown reports that were published from 2019 in the overview right through to my last one in 2022 before leaving for the elections in 23, you will find that we repeatedly refer to the building of an establishment of a brand new sanitary landfill and the closure of the dump sites at Kisi and King Tom. Sadly, this is money that was coming from the World Bank. It was approved. It was $20 million. I referred to it repeatedly over that period of time. But ultimately, in October last year, that grant was withdrawn because council was not the one to provide the land. The land was to be provided by the Ministry of Lands in collaboration with the Ministry of Defense and Finance. And the land identified in Hastings, after 5 years of studies, consultancies and so on, after 5 years, sadly, between the three ministries, the land that was provided to the bank was not satisfactory, and because there was encumbrance. Other people were claiming ownership of that land. The site plans did not align with the survey plans that the bank had and so on. So sadly, in October last year, in one of the bank missions, it was decided that the bank would withdraw. So when we talk about dump sites, you see again the need for local national collaboration, that we may have plans, but there are certain actions that are outside of our control because council does not have access to the quantum of land that would be required for the sanitary landfill. And sadly, it wasn't provided. Now, what can we do in that context? Because doing nothing is not an option. So we have been working really hard to identify partners who can work in the existing dump sites in King Tom and Kisii and utilize the waste there for recycling and or waste to energy. We've gone quite far now with 2 potential providers, and I'm hopeful that before September of this year, we will see the impact and we will see that addressed, because as you rightly say, the methane that is coming from dump sites that have been there for 35 years plus are a major contributor of pollution in the city. So our initial plan, we weren't able to proceed, but we have another plan. Okay. Tree planting, I'm going to have to answer this.
No, you're going to respond to it. For some reason, we'd like to hold you there.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, you were responding. Please finish up so that we turn around.
About tree. So we talked about the smoke, because the whole documentary was about the carbon emissions and the health impacts. And clearly one of the issues which is really relevant, we've touched on, but let me just elaborate again, which is the trees. So Freetown, the tree town, I know when I started, there were people who mocked, all technical talk about tick. That tick, yes, because trees really are essential to our lives. And so with the planting of the trees, which can be tracked, which are tracked, which you can find on a digital database. This is a city. We can't plant a forest in the middle of a city. So you will see our trees in catchment areas, and those trees are audited by the World Bank. So we can't make it up. There's an audit going on right now as I speak to you, but there's also an additional 75,000 mangroves which have just been planted in the Crew Bay community, providing jobs to 170 young people in Crew Bay. But very importantly, when it comes to carbon sequestration, that is the absorbing of carbon dioxide from the environment, mangroves have the greatest potential. They absorb the most. So we are pushing forward with our mangrove reforestation. You can see over 120 mangroves planted in Ojuku rather. But more importantly, we're also advancing with our accreditation process for entering the carbon market to ensure that this tree planting is sustainable. You talked about the vehicles, the smoke from the vehicles, and earlier on, Marina had mentioned in passing the cable car. So the cable car project, as we know, the feasibility study is finished. Now we're working on the financing. We have presented to Government of Sierra Leone, directly to the Minister of Finance, an offer from the French Treasury to participate in the financing. And we're looking forward to receiving the reply from government. Yesterday, I had a meeting with representatives.
Just to the cable car.
I am talking about the cable car.
You know, we don't have much electricity even for households.
You don't need electricity for the cable car. The cable car solution comes with solar.
Okay.
So there is a site identified for a solar farm, and the cost of the cable car project includes the construction of the solar farm. And I'm sure many people know that the light that's provided in Bo is coming from a solar farm. So I think people are beginning to understand that when you say solar, you're not just talking about being able to plug in your phones, that you can actually have, substantial power produced, energy produced from a solar farm. So the design of the cable car also includes, it's not a question of putting panels on top of the car, it's a question of actually having a dedicated area if you go to the airport, you might see that, you know, as you drive in, there's a the solar panels. So it's a similar concept. But what I was saying is that we're at the point of financing.
Okay.
So we currently have the ADB, the World Bank, all reviewing the documents. We have the French government already at the table. We're waiting on the Sierra Leone government, and you know, I'm hopeful because our meetings were very, very constructive, and I'm hopeful that that paperwork will be done so that that can progress. Yesterday, the European Investment Bank came on a delegation visit for a few days, and they came and paid a visit to me to speak specifically about the cable car. They've asked for all the due diligence and the feasibility study documents. They'd like to go over them. And they were, in the words of the head of the delegation, they are very excited. So we are moving forward.
All of these things, but just 3 years, and now you're turning attention to flag bearership.
Victor, my term ends in 2028, and I am a person who prides herself, by God's grace, in being diligent in the work that I do, which is why we have been able to build the first ever wastewater treatment plant, you know, do the construction of markets, and we'll be, you know, the introduction of the sanitation systems that we've introduced. Although they were challenged, we are now reconfiguring, and I'll come on to that shortly. We have work to do, I have work to do, and I will do the work. So the cable car will significantly address, because we can move 6,000 people in an hour. So it will significantly address the carbon emissions from transport, liquid waste, and the briquettes. As I mentioned, it's under my leadership that we built, for the first time ever, a wastewater treatment plant in King Tom, which is now able to use fecal sludge and transfer it into briquettes, transform it. We're going through a procurement process. Very, very pleased that very recently we now have a donor who is, we were struggling to buy the money we had to buy the machine to mechanize the briquette production process. The carbonization element of it was insufficient. So we've done the procurement twice and we weren't able to succeed. But we now have someone coming in and saying, we'll just pay for that. So that's being done. So again, I'm hopeful that we will go to scale, because the trees that are being cut because of construction, but they're also being cut because of charcoal. And you know, I was at this event yesterday where somebody was talking about people using liquid gas. Most people can't afford gas as a cooking alternative to charcoal, but they will be able to afford the briquettes. So if we're going to save our trees, we must provide a fuel alternative. And I'm really proud to be in a position to say we are doing that. We are being practical in our delivery of solutions, not looking at one side of the coin, but making sure we take a comprehensive view. And finally, just a quick word on the new sanitation system, because you talked about the illegal dump sites. And what we've seen is how systems can be built and systems can be undermined. Because like many, many processes, waste management is not an event. That's something I used to say when the National Cleaning Day, you know, was being trumpeted and promoted. I was always somebody who said, cleaning is not an event. It is a process. It is a system. And it starts with mindset. It starts with attitudes. I was in my car the other day and I saw someone from Apoda, I guess they were just being particularly naughty, because for you, or not Okada, because for you to take your plastic and not just throw it on the floor, but throw it into somebody else's car. And we were like, that was a bit extreme. But you know, but it's just the attitudes. People do quite outrageous things, and what we've just described is really being promoted by the guys who sadly are substance abusers, and they are themselves victims, because a substance user is themselves a victim, but they're creating more mayhem. And they're also creating it because, as I said, our dump site we weren't able to close them. Those dump sites do not favor the tricycles. Long and short of it, and I will want to say here a big thank you to the Minister of Local Government and to the Attorney General, and to the parliamentarians, because our new bylaw has been laid in Parliament and becomes effective on the 2nd of April. And that is going to transform, together with the team that's coming on board, the private sector, new private sector service providers that have come on board. We met with them yesterday. The city's been divided into 8 blocks. We have a service provider for 1, sometimes 2 blocks. You'll be hearing more on that. The bylaw which has been laid And again, thanks to the Minister for his leadership and his supportive partnership on this. And to the CA, he said, I didn't recognize him the last time, the CA worked very hard on this, along with all of the team at Council. This new bylaw will make it compulsory for every household to have to be registered with an FCC-approved waste provider. So the default will not now be, you won't break the law if we catch you throwing garbage on the street. No, you're breaking the law if you aren't registered for your waste to be collected at household level. And we're rolling that out. And that will significantly impact collection. What we're doing with the recycling companies in the dump site will impact the dump site and reduce emissions. What we're doing, the cable car, will improve economic productivity, will reduce emissions, and what we're doing with the tree planting will ensure that we're able to
run out of time
to sequester carbon.
Yes, we've actually run out of time, but quickly, just in a minute, I'm sure my producers are now on our neck for us to wrap up the program. But quickly, in just a minute, please, for people who still have the ideology that women are not fit to become president in this country, what would be your message to them in just a minute?
My message is that your gender doesn't define success. It's your delivery and your capacity that defines success, your ability to make a difference. And I believe that in the 7 years, we've just been having a conversation in which we have explained multiple interventions, which you can see with your eyes. We have seen women lead. When we have poverty, when we have a lack of development, when we have a lack of fulfillment, when 70% of our youth are unemployed or underemployed, what you need is not a gender. What you need is a leader that can deliver and make the difference, that can revitalize the economy, ensure that small businesses, medium-sized businesses grow, entrepreneurs have space, and that we have the investment that will give us the future that all of us deserve, particularly our youth.
I'm sure we'll have you here some other time to speak extensively about all of those things. But thank you so very much for being here this morning. There's Her Worship the Mayor of Freetown, Yvonne Aki-Sawyerr.